Hello guys, this is Pansmice36 and today's video is going to be all about painting and weathering tools on 1/3 scale armor. In the video here we're going to be looking specifically at this German tank here. So we're going to be going through and getting a nice wood grain, the compressed paper colors of the wire cutters there, also the metal, getting some nice highlights and kind of wear and tear on that. Just some nice, fun and easy basic weathering on these. I'm not the best person ever at painting like wood, stuff like that, but I keep it pretty simple here and I got a nice wood grain, which is something I hadn't really done before. But overall I'm very happy with how this came out. So hope you learned something new and hope you can apply it to basically any tools on any vehicle you have. Most tanks have tools that are wood and metal, so hopefully this video is a little inspirational. This video was done in collaboration with David from Dave's Model Workshop. He also has a similar painting and weathering video on tools, and I recommend you go check that out because that's going to be another one of his awesome weathering tutorials that he has, as you can see on his channel. He makes top quality content, and I recommend you go over there and see his take on painting and weathering tools. First up, let's look at all the products you're going to be using to paint the tools on this tank. Tamiya's XF63 German Grey will be our base color for all the metal areas, and then we're going to use XF18 and a little bit of XF2 if you want lighter colors or lighter tones for chipping effects. Model color German Camouflage Black Brown will be the color we use for the canvas cover of the barrel cleaning rods, and then Pansrice's 310 Old Wood, as well as these three Tamiya colors here, are the colors we're going to be using to paint the wood effects and get like different colors in there to simulate the wood grain. We're going to use XF9 and XF57 for the painting and weathering of the compressed paper grips of the wire cutters. And finally, in a few places, I actually repainted the camouflage stripes over top of the tools. A half and half mix of XF71 and XF65 is my color for that camouflage. I use X20A acrylic thinner by Tamiya for all the Tamiya paints, and then I use water for the Pansrice's and the model color colors. First up, we're going to paint all the metal areas of the tools, and we will begin with the toe cables. For this, I'm using Tamiya's XF63 German Grey. It's a nice dark gray color, I think it looks nice. I'm not too much of a fan of actual metallic paints, I don't like those very much. So I'll use either this or the AK Interactive equivalent, which is AK Interactive color number 720, which is their Panzer Grey and their rubber tires color. You'll need to thin down the paints a little bit because Tamiya paints are quite thick in the jar and they dry pretty quick, so they're not the best thing ever for brush painting, but I'm very familiar with them, and on these tools here, it's not like painting a camouflage pattern. You can just kind of brush it on. It works pretty easily. One thing I see a lot of people missing is the fact that the cable actually wraps around the end of the loop here. So make sure you actually get in there and paint that half of the cable area with the same color. Just don't be a little bit sloppy like I am here. Doing this really makes the toe cables pop out on the tank. Now we continue on by painting the rest of the metal areas of all the tools with the same color, XF63 by Tamiya. I'm not the most skilled brush painter ever, so I'm just kind of applying it a little bit heavily, but the Tamiya paints will always dry nice and flat on the surface, so you don't really have to worry about that too much. As you can see, the tools we paint are the head of the shovel, the crowbar here, the S-hooks on the side of the hull on the opposite side, the head of the axe, the head of the sledgehammer, and also the starter crank, which is that bendy thing on the back of the hull. And don't forget to actually paint the end of the starter crank because it actually sticks out of that little cylindrical holder there. The ends of the wire cutters were also painted with the same color, and now we're actually painting in the handles. XF9 Hull Red is the base color. The handles here are not Bakelite like everybody says, they are compressed paper that was dyed red. I will link a video up in the top corner here to Adam Mann's video where he shows off his original pair of them. A few areas here I'm actually kind of painting it on as a chip pattern because I want to show that green camouflage through in certain areas to make it look like it was painted over top of the tools. And we're going to go back in later and touch up the camouflage. As you can see, it looks pretty good as a base color. Now we're going to go in and add some kind of like stippling highlights with XF57 Buff by Tamiya, which is a nice lighter beige color. I'm kind of dry brushing this on and stippling it, and I'm kind of like getting highlights. I just want a little bit of a texture and a little bit lighter effect on there, but I still want that dark red color showing through. And this is pretty easy, only 2 paints, and it came out really well, so I think I'm going to do this from now on as my compressed paper wire cutters grips process. Now here I'm mixing up a base color which is the same as the camouflage color tank, which is about half and half XF71 and 65 I believe. And I'm just kind of painting it on a chip pattern to make it look like, as I said before, the camouflage was painted over top of the tools after they were on the tank. I did the same thing on the back here with the starter crank, and I also did on the crowbar as well, because that was over beside where the wire cutters were earlier. Now for the fire extinguisher, these were a dark gray color, but I want it to be a little bit of a different dark gray from the metal on the tools, so I'm adding some XF18 medium blue to the German gray in about a half and half mix to make that gray color a little bit different. And by the way, these were not red fire extinguishers, they should be this dark gray color. And honestly, I should have lightened this a little bit more with some white, because you can't really tell any difference from the actual metal areas of the tools anyways. Especially when I give this thing a winter camo afterwards, so it's kind of useless, but if I do it again, I'll make sure I lighten it a little bit more because I want it to stand out. It should be a little bit lighter gray than the standard Panzer gray color. And now once again, we're painting in the camouflage areas, as you can see right there. I did it again on the crowbar like I mentioned earlier, and we're just kind of feathering out the edges on the fire extinguisher here. So it looks pretty good. Overall, I'm happy with how this came out so far. For the wooden areas of the tools, I used Panzerrace's 310 Old Wood, which I think is a perfect, nice color. It's nice and light for the German wood on the tools. Usually I would just do this and then nothing else, but this time I actually went back and added a little bit of wood grain, but we're going to look at that later after this paint is time to dry. So as you can see, I'm just brushing it on. I thin it with a little bit of water because these Panzerrace's colors are quite thick in the jar. Now full disclosure, I'm not exactly sure what color those little ends should be, so I just painted them with the same metal color as the rest of the tools, XF63. And I'm also not sure what color the canvas cover at the end should be, so I'm just painting it with model color German camouflage black brown, because it's like a nice dark grayish brown color. So hopefully someday I'll figure out what color these actually should be. I've seen people do them up on models like this, and also I've seen them do it with the canvas cover a lighter grayish green color and then the end knobs being a brass color. But I think that's just because of some museum vehicles that are being restored in not exactly 100% accurate ways. So there are a few more areas that need to be painted with the wooden color, which again is Panzerrace's 310 Old Wood. Those will be the handles of the axe over here. We also have the handle of the sledgehammer on the rear, the jack block right next to this. We also have the handle of the shovel as well. So on this build, I left the jack off to make it easier to paint, and you can see I'm actually painting the handle here wood. This is something that I only recently realized should be wood. The entire rest of this thing has been painted with the same XF63 as the rest of the metal areas of the tools. So once again, I actually painted the camouflage area with the brush back over top of the wooden handles of the barrel cleaning rods here. And now we're going to go in with these three colors again, and we're going to make some kind of like wood grain highlights, just some texture on there. So this is how they look. I've basically got a lighter color, a darker color, and I've also got that glossy clear orange color too, which I'm going to try out. So my process for making the wood grain texture was actually just made up on the spot. I'd never done this before, so it was just something I was trying out, and it came out really well. My process was to first make little tiny chippy streak shapes just to make, that wood grain texture. And I used, on top of the base color, which was like a mid color, I used the lighter color first, which was the XF78. And then I went back and did the same thing with the darker color, which was XF72 Japan Ground Self-Defense Forest Brown. And by layering those back a little bit, I got a nice texture going. Then after that was done, I went in and applied kind of the same thing, small little areas, but I used that gloss orange color. You can see that here. And it looks a little bit weird right away, but then I went back in and redid like the same kind of chipping pattern with the base color, Panzerrace's 310 Old Wood, and also the two wooden colors I get on top of it, and it actually came out really cool. It's a little bit glossy here, so it's kind of hard to see, but later on you can definitely see it a lot better on the jack block, for example. Now right here you can see it actually came out very, very well, and I'm happy with it. So this is going to be my process from now on. Looks awesome, and it was pretty easy too. That's always good. So at this point we've base painted and weathered the wooden areas of the tools, but we've only really base painted the actual metal areas. So we're going to go back and do some weathering there. I'm using about a half and half mix of XF633, which is our dark color from before, and XF2 flat white to make a nice lighter gray color for the chipping. Then I add one drop of X28 thinner there to thin it down to a nice consistency. So we're going to do some corner wear on the tools here just to give them some kind of highlights. Again, I'm not a fan of metal colors, so I don't really ever use that. Sometimes I'll use a pencil lead to get a nice little shine, but I will never use like a metallic paint because it's way too shiny and weird looking. The texture of the shine, like the grains in there, is always way too out of scale. So I'm just kind of dry brushing and getting the corners of these tools to make them pop out a little bit. And then I went in afterwards and added some kind of scrapes up the back of the shovel to make it look like it's been used. I also installed the jack back into the actual clamps for it here, kind of half in there to make it look like it's been used recently. And then I did the same kind of thing, dry brushing, getting some nice corner wear on the metal areas here. Just carefully brushing it on and getting some nice highlights. Doing this can really bring out the nice detail of the rivets and all the little corners and edges of this thing. The rest of the tools were also given this treatment. The edges of like the axe, the sledgehammer, everything like that. Also the tow cables here is dry brushed, and then I also did a little bit of same kind of thing, some little chipping, scrapes, highlights on the starter crank on the rear here. So I went back and decided to add some like primer red, maybe rusty chips inside these things, and I used the XF9 Hull Red from before, and it was kind of too red. If I was doing this again, I would use the model colored German camouflage black brown I used for the canvas cover of the barrel cleaning rods, because that's a more like brown muted color. This red stood out too much on top of the actual gray here, so it's a little bit weird looking, but in the end it looked alright because I gave this thing a winter camouflage and I worked over this a little bit more. It looks pretty cool. You can see that really showing up on the corners of the jack here, and also on the S-hooks. Looks pretty nice. And with that, the tool painting and weathering on this tank is complete. I'm actually very happy with how this came out. I've never really done this much weathering of the tools before, especially the wooden textures, but it actually came out really nice. Very happy with it, and I hope you guys are too, and hope you learned something new. The techniques I try to show you are always things that I hope are kind of replicatable and quite simple and easy to understand, so hopefully these videos are helpful for you guys, and hope you enjoyed it. I also hope you go over there and check out David's video. I'll link it in the top here and at the end as well. It's always a good idea to see more than one modeler's view on certain things, because I know that the way I do things are often not exactly the best way to do things, probably a better way, and it's good to see more than one take on a certain technique, because that'll give you maybe your own idea where you can merge certain techniques to make your own, or just kind of get a feel for how the certain technique can be done. If you have any questions or comments or ideas for future videos, please post them in below. I always try my best to answer them or do a video if I can. As always, a big thanks to our patrons. We have Ricky from Ryan's Painting, John Butler, Ian Sustrick, Rudolph Kiros, Sam Murphy, Richard Ward, Philip Kruger, Oliver Hunt, the British Modeler, Jun Yi, Gary Wayne Bradford, Chris Corse, and Johnny Foxtrot, who all support me on Patreon, and also Dr. EO, who supports me through PayPal. You guys are all super generous, and it's much appreciated that you support me like this. It really helps me making these videos for you guys. Also, a huge thanks to Luke Steele, who's provided the music for me recently in my videos. It's awesome, and I've been really enjoying it. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.